Hello, I'm Randy Ritchie. This is Women Wrestlers You Should Know, commemorating Women's History Month, and is being brought to you commercial free and YouTube ad free, sponsored by Premier Pro Wrestling. So please like and subscribe. I didn't want to do this one, man, but today we're going to honor, and I do mean honor, Daffney the Scream Queen, Shannon Sprull. When I first met Shannon, it was at WCW. The truth be known, my wrestling company at the time was slated to get a developmental deal. In the process of doing that, I was also coming in and doing WCW and R&B security, and that's when I got to know Daffney, and I got to know David Flair, and I got to know Stacy Keibler, and somewhat Crowbar at the time. I think Chris Ford's his real name. Anyway, I wish you guys could understand what it's like to be on the road together. If you're in the industry today or not in the industry today, what ends up happening when you spend 24 hours a day with people, 25 days at least out of the month, and you spend every minute of every day together just about. You eat together, you train together, you chill together. It's a bond that really supersedes what a lot of friendships that you've had for years, because of the intimacy and spending so much time together. And it's an art form to be able to do that, and bond with people, look past stuff. You learn to do it because you have to, and then after a while you connect to certain people and you share a connection that you just never had or will have again. I didn't have that with Daffney. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that those young people, Daffney, David Flair, Stacy Keibler, and Chris Ford or Crowbar, they had that. But especially when I think about it, David Flair, Stacy Keibler, and Daffney. Now, I had, and I'm trying to do this without bearing anybody, I didn't want to do this one because I didn't want to get that intimate with my feelings, in regards to what happened with Daffney or Shannon. But against my better judgment, I decided I probably should. So I was very close to somebody who was there at WCW at the time, and I'm going to try not to mention names, and that's why I didn't want to do this, because I don't know how to do it without mentioning names and burying individuals. But I'm certainly going to try. And the way I understand it is there was some sort of casting thing that really wasn't a casting thing whatsoever. It was just some cheap-ass promotional ploy. And what ended up happening was this thing that was a work Daffney really stood out in, Shannon really stood out in, and she should have stood out in it. She was beautiful. She was creative, charismatic. She's an actress. She could model. I mean, look at the girl's features, But from the way I understand it is she got into wrestling at the time to get exposure to go into Hollywood and to do some bigger acting. And at the time, there really wasn't a better opportunity to get such press, so to speak. WCW wasn't as hot as it once was, but it still had great ratings and that reputation of being as hot as Nitro was. The way I understand it is Shannon didn't ever want to wrestle. She just wanted to be a character around wrestling. And then when she got in it and she got around people like the people I mentioned, she fell in love with the industry. But she still did not want to wrestle in the first place. Now, let's talk about that for a second. Daffney, Shannon, didn't have to wrestle because of her look, because of her charisma, because of her seconding, her managing, and just her ring presence as a non-wrestler. I don't understand, I'll never understand why this business all of a sudden decided that it had to do things like try to force the Nitro girls and non-wrestling people into wrestling matches. And then these, in my opinion, idiots that, had been around the industry a long time, all of a sudden, I'm not talking about Fit Finley agenting the female wrestlers at World Wrestling Entertainment. I'm not talking about real agenting and real wrestlers. I'm talking about non-wrestlers that don't want to wrestle in the first place, okay? Why they think that's a feather in their cap, if they can get some sort of half-ass spots or half-ass whatever the hell out of them in a ring, instead of outside of a ring, instead of a character around the ring. It never gets over, It kills off the business, and it kills off the person they're working with, and it kills off the individual. And if you got to cheat like that, like the creative at WCW at the time, who was just trying to throw 10,000 things against the wall, 10,000 stupid ideas to see if one would stick. That's what you do with those. That's not creative. There's nothing creative about it, But whatever, it is what it is. And then what happens is, after so much time passes, you're used to that life and you want to be in that wrestling life. Once you get let go of, your life just isn't the same. You end up going after some brass ring, which really isn't a brass ring in the first place. But she did, Shannon, get a short stint developmental deal. I want to say, I can't remember if it was Florida Championship or OVW or NXT. It must have been NXT at the time. But she wasn't going to foot that bill because they signed her as the developmental talent to be a performer, and that's not what she was really passionate about, And I'm not saying she was the shits by any stretch of the imagination, but she didn't have to wrestle and end up being a household name. Now, my path crossed with Shannon later on. I had a blog back in, I forget what year it was, but I was blogging about TNA wrestling, and I was exposing what was coming down the pike, and everything I said came to fruition, But when I went and posted about how effed up that company was and how angry it made me because of the opportunity that was blown, network television, getting decent money for it, opportunity. I thought that they were going to provide opportunity for older wrestlers that could pass the torch to developing younger wrestlers. Well, I left TNA in 2007. Daffney came in a more consistent role, I think a year and change later. But as I was exposing things like, number one, the mistreatment of the production staff, and number two, the mistreatment of the TNA knockouts, which is something that Dutch Mantell and I incepted, which also, like I says, is, and I'll say it again, it changed the wrestling industry for the fan and for female wrestlers, because it wasn't just gimmick matches. It's actual real athletes that can have real matches, and give credibility to women's wrestling finally. Well, during that time frame, and I don't know if you guys know the word complicit. I'm not a real, you could probably tell I'm not a real linguist here, but the word complicit I know from my decent understanding of law. So you guys probably know it, but for the younger people that don't know it, this is dubbed as the wrestling business, but it's not the wrestling business, and TNA Wrestling wasn't the wrestling business. TNA Impact wasn't the wrestling business, or done by wrestling people, or even people with half of a soul and 1 ounce of integrity. Shannon, they wanted her to take a choke slam from the ring apron through not even a table, a board with barbed wire wrapped around it over like horses, you know? She didn't want to do it. There's so many people complicit in that, and that really hurt her. She got really hurt there, and she said she didn't no way wanted to do this. Then here comes the manipulation. The first guy, who I'm not going to say his name, and you know who he is, he was the booker, and the fans used to chant "no more blah blah blah" at the tapings at the time, because it was just such awful television. An 8th grade kid in drama class could have wrote better than that. Then the person who administered the move, and you guys can say whatever about me being disgruntled or whatever, I know what I know, and that person gets the idea from the creative, the head of creative, and his little ego, once it got in his head, was going to play along with the manipulation. And then the agent or the person in charge of talent relations, they all conned this girl. They all conned Shannon into doing it, and it played out the way that she thought it would. She got hurt, and then she was told that they were going to pay her medical bills, and they never paid her medical bills. Well, off of my blog, my website, I got hit up by a lawyer from a really decent firm in Nashville area. And I'm going to go ahead and say his name, Christian Garson. And this guy was good, but not only was he good, he had integrity. And I know that's an oxymoron, but once in a while you do run into a lawyer who has integrity. And he was just approached with this case, and after we talked and I shared the facts and I proved the facts via the emails that I had, he knew that he could win this case for Shannon Sprull and get her what she had coming, which was covering her medical bills and a little bit, not as much as she should have gotten or could have gotten if it would have went on and on, for the pain and trouble and all the weight. So the way TNA Wrestling even handled that part rather than settle it, they spent more to have more than one lawyer. It was a team of lawyers show up to try to intimidate Shannon's lawyer. If they would have just paid Shannon's bills, which was all she was asking for in the beginning, which they were responsible for, they would have spent less money. But that's not how they did things. You see? So at the end of the day, after all the shit was said and done, this thing could have really spun into a lot of different lawsuits. At the time, there was sexual harassment going on, and someone's going to file a suit against that. There were also unpaid medical bills, and then there was a whole shitload of other mistreatments that I don't even know what you call them right now because I'm not thinking about them or looking at statute in regards to the mistreatment and the underpay for particularly the TNA knockouts. Well, they finally ended up settling, and the only reason I think TNA ended up settling is because there's absolutely no way what they did to Shannon Sprull was undefensible. And I'm going to go ahead and say at that point, people finally started to see this isn't the company to invest your time into watching. This isn't the company that you'd spend your time and money in going to see a live event, getting a t-shirt, or even pay-per-view. Now, it wasn't about the individuals at the time, my disdain, but the disdain there is that these individuals, some of them weren't smart enough to realize that, they were going to take advantage of them, and they took advantage of a lot of good natures. And there's a handful of people involved there that knew better. And I don't know where the thinking came from to have loyalty to the company rather than loyalty to the person. And one of these people, the idiot head writer whose idea it was in the first place, still from time to time comes up and talks about how he was, bro, I was the last person to talk to her, bro. Get the fuck out of here. If people only knew, and how fragile is your ego, I think it's effing disgusting. that this guy who actually was the inceptor of putting her in harm's way is still trying to capitalize off of this imagined relationship that he had, and he's still trying to cover his ass in regards to the guilt that he feels, because there's no way that you can absolve yourself from something like that. So let me just digress and go through it one more time clearly. The person that wrote this shit in the first place was complicit. The owner of the company was complicit. The chief financial officer, who was really running the company at the time, was complicit. Panda Energy, which backed TNA Wrestling, was complicit. The talent relations guy who was trying to manipulate her all afternoon was complicit. And the guy, the actual performer that had nothing to gain by putting her through a barbed wire board, was complicit. And in a perfect world with more time and more resources, there would have been a hell of a settlement, should have been a hell of a settlement that should have kept her basically financially insecure free. But anyway, I'm not saying this had anything to do with Shannon's suicide. I'm just saying it certainly doesn't help. When you work with someone or someone works for you, especially in the wrestling industry, you look out for them. You got to know who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with and the impact of what you're asking them to do when they tell you so many times no, and in so many uncertain terms no. You don't look and expose that weakness or that weak moment where they don't want to let you down, because there are people out there that are people pleasers to a fault, to finally get them to agree to do it. So anyway, I don't think there's anybody to blame for Shannon Sprull's death. She ended up committing suicide, and everybody took it real hard. I don't know enough about the situation to say that nobody was there for her, so I don't want to do that. Whenever I think of something that upsets me or hurts me, I want to pin blame on something, and the blame should basically really be placed on, in my opinion, the lack of knowledge that we all have as a society, especially when she passed. I hope it's getting a little better now. No, I don't think it's getting any better now, to be honest with you, but I think they're finally talking about it. Is the resources, the understanding, some forms of education, and public acknowledgments in regards to mental illness, specifically depression. It kills, and as somebody that has attempted suicide, that has been suicidal, I don't know how I got through those things. I guess I was lucky, and a lot of times for a lot of us that are still here that have made attempts, for a lot of us that are prone to depression with suicidal tendencies, maybe, I don't know why we're picked, but we're lucky, and because of that, I know I'm lucky. I appreciate each day a little bit more. I appreciate not having to start over again where I was. I'm medicated and I seek treatment and I get help and I have a support system. But maybe we should just all be a little bit more cognizant, of those people around us. Nobody likes to ask for help. I wish it was a little easier for us as a whole, as a society today, to ask for help. Sometimes you could be, and I'm sure you people have heard this term before. Have you ever been in a room full of people and felt alone? Well, that's not just like a one-time occurrence for some of us when you're really in the deep throes of depression. You could be around everybody and have that stupid smile on your face and making the stupid jokes and, doing whatever. How's it going? Great, man. But inside, so maybe we should just all kind of pay attention to that and look for the signs. I wish I could have, in regards to Shannon Sprull and others. Now, that being said, I was never bae with Shannon. I was never besties with Shannon. I would pass her in the hallways and I would always, make sure I said hello, but we would sit down to eat at catering, talks. But it wasn't like that. You don't go to TV and crawl up someone's ass, man. That's a work day, you know? And it's just not the time or place to do it. And I certainly, what was great about it is somewhere on social media, Christian Garson and that law firm credits me heavily for helping her win that case, and helping them win that case for her. And I was. When it comes to certain things about law, I'm a savant. I can read that stuff, retain it, understand it. When I'm talking to a lawyer, I can say, what about this? What about that? And then they say, okay, well, we need to prove it with this or that. I say, well, there's this or that or this or that or this email or this statement, prove it. You know what I'm saying? I'm really good at that. And I put a lot of time into it, into her. And I didn't have anything to gain by that. I wasn't trying to, I'm going to force this beautiful girl to be my friend now. It wasn't that kind of party. It was the right thing to do, and she was very grateful for that, and she expressed her gratitude to me, but I didn't hold her that and say, okay, now you got to be my fucking friend. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, the other thing I hate, I'm going to just wrap it up here in regards to what happened with Shannon Sprull, Daffney, the Scream Queen, was the way the media grabbed onto it, the media, the wrestling internet, the internet wrestling community could have given two shits about her until she died, and all of a sudden we miss her, Why don't we appreciate people just a little bit more, That's why I don't like the internet wrestling community. It's so flaky, and you don't hear shit about her since, unless somebody's looking to get some sort of cheap absolvement like Vince Russo. Yes, Vince Russo. That's the writer I'm talking about. That's the most complacent for this stupid idea and his stupid, sick attachment to shock jock booking. They had nothing to gain. How's Abyss going to get over putting little Daffney through not even a table? A table would have been safe, but a stupid board with some bullshit barbed wire wrapped around it on some sawhorses. Come on, And then at the end of the day, you know what Spike TV does? After all that shit, they said, oh, this is depicting abuse on women. They didn't even fucking air it. So that shows you the kind of minds you were dealing with, And I hope those guys, I'm not one to say that guilt and shame is something that should be lived with. If you're sorry and you fixed your shit, then I think you're entitled to let go of it. If you've made an amend is a lot more than just saying I'm sorry. If you'd made peace with that person, I just don't see that as happening with these people I'm talking about in regards to Shannon before she passed. Now, I do know she had a lot of friends that were very hurt and taken back, sincere, real friends in the wrestling industry that took it very hard. Sometimes I wish that people in wrestling, the older ones, the younger ones, the ones that are no longer, and quote, unquote, relevant to the industry, realize all the other gifts that we have. There's so many things that we are capable of doing once you've written a television, been involved with a television, and Daffney was so effing compelling on Nitro, on Thunder, on the pay-per-views. When she was managing Crowbar, Chris Ford, watch that stuff, man. It was one of the most compelling things left on Nitro and Thunder, And I think that, if we looked at that stuff, there's so many things that we're capable of doing in Hollywood, and in movies and in TV, even music, you know what I mean, where we can make a living beyond wrestling, I do know that Shannon was also a military brat, so that's got to be difficult from the get-go because you don't have any old friends because you're never in one place long enough during your formidable years, when you're forming your personality. I can't imagine what that would have been like for a female, as a child. I do know, too, that she was so creative, and not just by looking at her, she really played to a new type of attractive, she played to a crowd that was attractive to a different kind of beauty at the time. Yes, it was gothic, but I don't want to use that word just gothic because she kind of superseded that. She was a beautiful woman with, hints of gothic, you know what I mean? And also, the part that she played, the role that she played, she's the one that made that thing work. You know what I mean? They didn't get a lot of direction at the time. That's what was so wild about WCW at the end, the last year, maybe two, whenever the years were that they were not just beaten by WWE's product, but destroyed by it. The animals were running the zoo and nobody gave a shit. You know what I'm saying? Well, being unsupervised, and she was young. I think she was only 20 years old at the time, or in her 20s at the time. That's a lot of pressure, but you never knew it by watching her on television. She had guts, she had creative prowess, and she was beautiful. And I think she also did a lot for modeling, period. She definitely had the features of a model and physical beauty, but her creativity kind of pointed out that you don't have to all be cookie cutters that are supposed to be anorexic or have eating disorders either. And I'm not saying there's an ounce of fat on the girl. I'm just saying she really, really expanded, in my opinion, the way that, models, actors, actresses, especially women in wrestling, were perceived at the time. I'm sorry that she passed. I really am. I took that hard, and I prayed for her soul and her family for a long time. And I'm sure those wounds have become livable, but some things you just never let go of, so I can't imagine what her real close friends, family, and loved ones feel. I just hope that, it gets easier for them as time goes on, But anyway, sorry this one was on a down note. I do honor and respect this woman, and I respect her staying power, man, because how many people, especially with depression, deep-seated, obvious depression, could have kept going and hung in there during that lawsuit, This, again, is Women Wrestlers You Should Know. And, please support Premier Pro Wrestling and the links in the description. And be cool, like, and subscribe.